Here we go. Good evening. It is Tuesday night. It is Tuesday with Ben Stowe night. Good evening, Ben.
Good evening, John. How are you?
I am wonderful. And how are you doing on this lovely day?
It is a lovely day, actually. So I'm doing great. It's nice. The sun is shining, and we see the faintest glimpses of things that look green poking out of the ground, starting to try to make their way through. So
Nice, nice. And for those of you who don't know, Ben is in northern Minnesota, which means that the ice cap is slowly receding.
we do still have a lot of ice on the lake. Yeah, we're inside the Arctic Circle.
Or at least it seems that way sometimes. But yeah, it is Tuesday night. It is gear chat night, gear talk night, gear question answering night. But before we jump into that, we've got to talk about the shirt of the week. What do we got this week, Ben?
Oh well, okay, good. We got another one for our Star Trek fans. So they're feeling kind of left out with all the new buzz about Star Wars, I think.
Resistance is not futile.
That's right. Resistance is voltage divided by amperage.
Instead, it's that. Yeah, sometimes you might have to explain some of these to me, Ben. There's some I get. But that's okay. That's okay. So
well, if I understood you right, we're going to be talking about cable tonight, so we might talk about these a little bit more.
Yeah, I think so, because we've had some questions coming in about cables and wires and such, and I figured, well, let's just kind of dig into that again. We did this a few weeks back, but I think it's an area in which everybody struggles with at some point in time.
I know I do. We all, sooner or later, I think we have to succumb to the unrelenting force of physics.
Isn't that the truth?
Physics is patient. It will get you on its own terms.
Yeah, that it is.
Trying to cheat it.
That it is. And this past weekend, I actually had the privilege to go and kind of get a tour of a facility that Ben and his crew worked to do some wiring on. And when you're talking, with the wiring that we do as mobile DJs, nothing close to the amount of wiring technology and know-how that you guys had to display at the Sanford Center there up in Bemidji.
Well, it's one of the cool things about what I do here is I work with some other great engineers at NLFX, and we do a lot of engineered projects. We do projects for nuclear power generation plants, aerospace, the Department of Defense, stadiums and those sorts of things. And it's a lot of fun. You get to sort of see different conventions and different schools of thought. And, it's amazing though, while you said it's nothing like what you would do as a mobile DJ, maybe in terms of scale, but the physics is exactly the same.
Yeah.
That's the cool thing about it. It's all relative for sure. So,
yeah. And I think that was the just the scale, when we're usually, on our system, we might be running a signal line to go to your powered speaker and maybe a power line, 2 wires. And I think some of those wraps that you had 30 wires in it, and that was going off one way and another 30 that way. It was incredible.
Well, it's just more of the same, rinse and repeat. So
that is. Well, actually, one of the things that people are talking about, of course, is when you're running the powered speakers and you're running some of the cables to those. Now, sometimes you can pick up some interference. What are some of the common things that they might be picking up when they're talking about I'm getting interference through their wires that they're hearing in their speakers?
Well, probably your biggest offenders are EMF or potentially some RFI or maybe ground hum. Where you've got there's all kinds of nasty things that are out there. SCR hash, different sorts of things that can induct itself onto the signal or get in there somehow. And like we talked about a couple episodes back, that's why our cables are shielded. And the purpose of the shield is to keep the bad stuff out and protect the good, the gooey inner goodness,
Yep.
of our signal. Keep that protected and pure.
Now you mentioned 4 possible things, and there's only one of them I actually really understood. That was the ground hum. I've experienced that numerous times where you've got that hum over the sound system. Now the 2 that you said were kind of the main ones. What were those again? And kind of give me more of a third grader definition of what those are.
That was the third grade. We're going to have to go to fourth grade if we're going to talk more about it. EMF is electromagnetic, and RFI is radio frequency.
Okay.
And these amount to essentially inducted forces, magnetic fields that from other electrical currents that induct themselves into our wire. Much the way a transformer works, it inducts the voltage from one coil to the other. It doesn't come across directly. I think we're probably at seventh grade now.
Yeah, you're getting a little hot. So you mentioned that one's magnetic, and that's a magnetic version, and there's a radio. So the radio one could actually be picking up. Would it be picking up things like literally radio stations, or is it radio frequencies such as maybe wireless microphones? What types of things would be producing that signal?
Well, I'm trying to think of ways to keep this simple. So I think for simplicity's sake, we'll just jump right to radio stations, because a wireless mic is very unlikely to create problems in your cable unless you already have a really catastrophic problem as it is.
Okay.
You're talking about a transmitter that's maybe 15 milliwatts. That's 15 thousandths of a watt. Whereas a radio station might be 100,000 watts. That's a lot of energy. And just think about it in terms of range. Your wireless mic has a range of a few hundred feet, probably, on an average, whereas a radio station is, miles and miles and miles and miles. Sure. We run into this many times with facilities that are located next to radio stations, whether it's a permanent install or a portable one. And, your wire absolutely could be an antenna. So those are external forces. There's a lot of things that can work against you inside a venue too. If your power circuit is on the same power supply as a compressor motor for a commercial refrigerator, you could have all kinds of bad stuff going on. It just lives in the power, and there's not much you can do to get it out of that signal. I really wish there was a third grade solution to these things, and there are some things we can do in terms of getting rid of noise on our power. We can use things like discrete, symmetrically isolated power supplies. Now we're probably at ninth grade, but with cabling, good shielding, solid grounds, can help us prevent our cables from turning into antennas. But then they might be more susceptible to ground problems. So, you kind of have to, A, hope you're not put in that situation, but B, if you are, you really do need to address it on that ninth grade level, because it's a ninth grade problem. Okay. So
let's look at you mentioned the shielded cables, quality shielded cables, and if it's grounded. Mm-hmm. Now, does that have to be grounded to make this work? Would it have to be grounded on both ends? Well, you're going into the powered speaker and you're going into your amplifier. Where's the ground? Where's that being grounded to? I guess maybe that's my question.
Well, this is probably progressively going up the grade levels here. There's like Neil Muncy made a career out of talking about pin 1 and grounding of audio circuits. How do we ground audio circuits? What's the convention we'll use? And getting everybody on board with that. But at the end of the day, I would want my ground to be intact all the way through. If I let's just take this back to the DJ. Mm-hmm. I want my XLR cable to have a good quality 95% braid shield on my audio, and I want it connected to pin 1 on both sides. I want to make sure that my all my components are grounded. There's other problems that people run into with powered speakers too, and that's my mixer's plugged in over here, and my powered speaker's plugged in over here, and there's a difference of voltage potential between the grounds, and that's a challenge, and that's maybe the easiest solution for that is to run power back to where your mixing board's at too. Put them on the same power supply, and make sure they're on the same ground with the same voltage potential to ground. Otherwise, we can get that ground hum. Yeah. Lifting the ground might turn the cable into an antenna, and then we might be more vulnerable to the radio problem.
Interesting. So you mentioned that if you're, the two different, when you use the phrase that they could be on different voltage, is that meaning like this one could be at 118 volts and this could be at 121 or something? Is that what you're referring to?
Well, it's the old saying from the movie 221, 220, 221, whatever it takes, but if you don't get the reference, don't worry about it.
I'm sorry, man. I don't get out much. If it isn't an animated show with children, I don't get to see it right now. I'm sorry.
No, it was from the 80s, I think, too. I'll have to dig it up for you.
I'm not that old.
All I remember from the movie was that scene. He's doing some home improvements in his house, and the guy says, "Oh, you're wiring it all 220?" And he says, 220, 221, whatever it takes. And And the guy says, "Oh, I see you're very handy." And it's anyway. I digress. Somebody can tweet me with what the movie is. I forgot. No, it's not a difference in the actual voltage that this is 118 and that's 121. That's not really the issue.
Okay.
It's a difference potentially of the voltage potential to ground. And if we go from ground to ground, we should have 0 volts always. And if we go from our neutral conductor to ground, we should have 0 volts. But sometimes that isn't the
Hmm.
case. We have different potentials, and it's again, it gets pretty.
Sure.
The simple solution, guys, is just run power back to where your mixing board is at. Then you don't have to worry about that problem. Honestly, the other solutions involve running new wire, potentially installing new panels in the building, and you're not going to do that. And you're not going
Yeah.
to do that before your gig starts. So run a cord.
Yeah, literally putting your sound system in essence on one outlet and then lights on the other, what have you.
Well, yeah, because that gets into another thing, with lights, the way that they dim, and there's different types of circuits, with SCRs and triacs and those kinds of things. We get into how LEDs dim by turning on and off very rapidly. It's called pulse width modulation, and you can end up with like SCR hash or some other, some of these artifacts coming into our audio signal. It sounds like a really high pitched whine potentially. You maybe notice it as you adjust the dimming curve of your lights.
Hmm.
Adjust up and down the dimming curve of the light. You'll hear this sound come into your sound system. And switching circuits is the first thing I do, but that's not a surefire guarantee either. It's going to get rid of the problem. So if we want to talk about noise and all the ways to solve it, this is going to turn into a mini series epic. So we'll be here for a while.
That's interesting. I guess I've experienced. You mentioned with the dimming. I've actually experienced that through my audio system, but I didn't realize there was that was causing it. I thought I had. Yeah, interesting. Thought I had a malfunctioning board or something, so I changed it out. But I didn't realize it was probably just a.
Well, if you change it out and the problem goes away, that's a good start.
Yeah. Well, it could have been that I changed wires too, though.
It could be a number of things. And as much as I love to get to the whiteboard and hammer these things out, I think maybe sometimes people are frustrated by the simple solutions I offer them. But the reality is those are the best solutions to employ on game day.
Yeah.
And I'll say, well, did you change wires? Well, yeah, but can't you, conjure up the physics gods? And yeah, but can't you just change wires? You got a gig in 10 minutes. Let's go.
Yeah. Swap it out. See if it helps.
Sure, I could, we can get the boys together and we can hammer this thing out on the whiteboard, or you can just change chords and hope that works.
But that's not as much fun, man.
I know we'll talk about it during the week, but if you've got a gig, you got to, again, start with the simple solutions because they're the fastest things to do, and they're probably going to solve it anyway.
Yeah.
So, unless again, if it's a radio station or something like that, then the other thing you could do is build a giant Faraday cage over your venue, just cover the whole thing in brass screen wire, and you probably get rid of your radio problem. But
or what about the Simpsons where he's wearing the hat with the aluminum foil? Does that do anything? No.
Sure, yeah.
So Major League Baseball won't read my thoughts. See, now there was my reference for the night, my Simpsons reference. So.
That's good, yeah.
Yeah, let's see. Again, it was cartoon. So now we talked a little bit about, okay, so we're the XLR with the shielding or the in running for the powered speaker that way. But now if a person has a regular speaker wire, and most of the speaker wires that I've got are just a 2 connector, and I don't even know if there's any shielding or not. But I noticed when I used to run that type of a sound system. Oh, yep, there you go. Is that the one I have actually that I was thinking of when I was running it? We had 1/4 inch. Would it be the tip sleeve? I'm sorry. That's what I had. Now exactly that type of cable. I seem to have more noise off that than I do today. Now that I'm running with the powered speakers, is that an accurate? Is that possible?
Well, of course it's possible. I would say it has less to do with the cable, though. This cable is probably not shielded. That speaker cable is probably not shielded. But the source of your noise, depending on what it is and where it's coming from, may have more to do with the rest of the system. Because undoubtedly, if you went to a powered speaker, you got rid of an amplifier, and you maybe got rid of some cabling in your rack, and those were all probably more likely culprits. one of the real reasons is, and this is maybe a good segue to cable length, but one of the real reasons is we look at a microphone cable, and it's got all of its shielding and stuff in it.
Yep.
But it's very small conductors because it's carrying a very small signal. Conversely, that small signal is also much more vulnerable to interference.
Okay.
The ratio of interference to signal is going to be closer, whereas a speaker cable, you can see is much bigger. And that just worked out well. Nice product placement there.
Yeah. Wow, that's incredible.
I swore it was an accident, but now it's permanently implanted in your brain.
That's right.
Everybody take notice of the logo. All right. Really was an accident. It worked out good. Yeah. Anyway, moral of the story, you can see the size, difference is pretty substantial with the speaker cable to the mic cable. The speaker cable is running much higher voltages and much higher amperages as well. But the higher voltage, really gives us that much greater signal presence over the interference. They're much less vulnerable to the interference. It's not nearly as likely to create problems in a speaker signal.
Interesting. Interesting.
Yeah.
Now you mentioned speaker cable length. Let's talk about that, specifically about the regular speaker. Now let's not talk about powered speaker, the XLRs for that. What is a I don't want to call it a safe length, but what's a good length, and when do we start to get to the point where we're getting too far or too long of a run?
For what?
How come everything has got this little...
Well, I didn't say it depends.
No, you didn't. I know, but you're just basically giving me a sideways version of it depends.
I waited all week to find a different thing to say. So, what you talking about?
So I'm doing this wedding, and I want to put speakers on the other end of the room, and I want to run wires over there. I mean, is there a point where I get to 100 feet out? Does it, if I've got an 8-ohm cabinet over there, and if I have an amplifier that can, basically do 8 ohm aside without a problem, is there a point where I'm getting too far, that I'm either getting, too much signal interference, or maybe, maybe the resistance is too great? What kind of problems am I going to have going that distance?
Okay, so we're talking about a speaker.
Yes.
A passive speaker, meaning
yes.
It's coming from your amplifier via one of these, or in your case, one of these.
Yeah, exactly. That was respectful, man. I just
sure hope we don't need that again.
Cat, get it.
Ben is unchained tonight. Look out,
throwing
everybody.
Things and
he's loose,
dissing, and he's doing product placement. It's incredible.
It's like the man's trying to eat or something. All right. Yeah, there is a point, and ironically, the higher voltage, the higher amperage is at issue. Volt drop, really is a relationship between the resistance in the cable, the resistance to the flow of electricity.
Yep.
Resistance.
Da-da-da.
Impedance, resistance, whatever. In this case, we're not going to get into the AC/DC argument. It's not a rock band. It's electrical theory. But anyways, and the length and the amperage. So the length is absolutely a factor, as is the amperage of the signal, and that's all relative to to how much resistance. So the moral of the story is, the bigger the speaker cable, the longer you can run without a problem.
Okay.
The other thing, though, is it's relative to the impedance of the speaker you're driving. If you're driving an 8 ohm speaker, you can run further without loss than you can with a 4 ohm speaker.
Interesting.
And I'll try to explain this in a way that makes it make a lot of sense.
So basically, if you would have two speakers, an 8 and a 4, and you had the same length of wire.
Yep.
And okay, just wanted to make sure. Okay, now explain why that's the case.
Yep. Sorry, my phone's off to the side, and it's everybody in the world is tweeting me and Facebooking me right now. So I appreciate that, but I'm trying to do a show.
God.
Because you have an impedance in the cable,
mm-hmm.
and you have an impedance in the load of the loudspeaker, and it's a ratio. For example, let's just say that we have 1 ohm of impedance in our cable, which for those who are counting is, I believe, the impedance of 10 gauge speaker cable at 1,000 feet. But anyway, it doesn't matter.
Sure.
Well, it does, but we'll get to that. So just for the sake of fun, let's say that we have 1 ohm impedance in our cable, and we have an 8 ohm speaker. So, it's an 8-to-1 ratio at that point. But if we have a 4 ohm speaker, it's a 4-to-1 ratio. the power gets divided up in easy terms. We'll say that, 80% of our power goes to the speaker at a 4 ohm load and 20% goes to the cable.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, yep.
So, if we're running a 2 ohm speaker, now you've got 30% of your power going to the cable and, 60% of the power going to the speaker. So you can see where relatively the cable accounts for more and more and more loss.
Interesting.
Yeah, so for the sake of easy math, and it depends on how much you want to lose, you can do it at just about any length, but you're gonna start losing proportionally this power, and if we say, well, I want to maximize my loss at half a decibel, then and I've got some fun charts that any of your viewers want to ask, I'll send them to them. So there you go, viewers. There's your invitation. John, put up the Twitter.
Yeah, exactly. Let's get that up there. There we go.
Put up the Twitter graphic.
If you want this information, the pretty charts and things that'll make your hair kind of turn colors.
No, it's just physics. It's just charts.
For physics and charts, it'll make your head spin.
But for example, if our half ohm loss is acceptable at 100 feet with 4 ohms, it would be 200 feet at 8 ohms. For example. So the answer is it depends. To be honest,
it does. But now at least I understand why it depends. So that's a good
now,
thing.
when we get into other signal types like microphone and DMX, then the answer changes again.
Okay.
And with microphone, we have fundamentally a very similar signal to what we send to a speaker, just much, much, much smaller. Instead of 100 volts, or something in the higher range, we're talking about millivolts,
okay,
thousandths of a volt. That lower voltage makes us maybe more vulnerable. But the lower amperage of the signal also allows us to run really long ways. Plus, you have things like balanced signals, and we can change the impedances of the devices. And again, just like that speaker, where it's relative with an audio signal, a line level or a mic level audio signal too. But you could maybe, depending on quality cable and output impedances and input impedances of the devices, and this gets really complex. So we're going to just pick a number and hang our hat on it.
Sure.
But you could say, 300 meters, which is just under 1,000 feet.
Wow.
So we have runs that are 500, 600, 700 feet in stadiums all the time, and with acceptable loss characteristics. Now, within a cable, you do have things like inductance and capacitance, and it's notable that passive crossovers in loudspeakers are made up of inductors and capacitors that deliberately filter sound for us. They shave off, high frequency or low frequency.
Yep.
We have to take note that that's going to happen in our cable, and the longer we do it, the more of it's going to happen. So again, it does really depend on the quality of your cable and those sorts of things, but we might start to see some loss at, high frequencies, 20K, and we maybe don't care. They're outside the, most of the human hearing range. We might say, we can live with that. We need to run this cable 1,000 feet, and we don't care about 20K.
Yeah.
But those are things that engineers can make that decision. Again, probably not applicable for a DJ. There's a pretty good likelihood that, especially using a quality cable, you'll be able to run a microphone signal as long as you could possibly want to.
Sure.
DMX, on the other hand, is a digital signal and has a fairly defined standard. Again, double underscore this, it really depends on the quality of your cable.
Sure.
It's, we split some cables apart a couple weeks ago. NLFX has a brand of cables, and I'm not pitching for our cables. They're great cables, but physics, as we said earlier in the show, I think is not negotiable.
Mm-hmm.
And you can pretend it is, but it's not, and it will get you. So a good quality cable is going to carry the signal more reliably and further. And there's my caveat to that. But the answer to DMX cable is, we can say that it's 1,000 meters. So call it 3,280 feet is the magic number.
And you can do that in essence if you had one very high quality shielded cable.
Mm-hmm. A proper DMX cable with the proper inductive, capacitive properties, proper shielding,
without any kind of inline boosting whatsoever.
Yeah, wow. It will run 3,280 feet. That's notable compared to a technology like Ethernet, which is limited to 100 meters, which is 328 feet. I think the speed of the signal really is what the issue is there. At the core of it, that's the limitation for the Ethernet standard. Is it's so much faster than DMX, so very much faster.
Hmm.
And there's it gets into some more really funky. I get to spend a day in a building with some of the guys from IEEE, and other nerds out there are going to go, "Really, you did?" Yeah, I did. It was pretty cool. But
There's like
back to third grade. Sorry.
there's like 5 of you going, "Woo!" The rest are like,
Yeah. IEEE. Talking about some new emerging audio transport standards, by the way.
okay. So if you're talking about building a lightsaber, I think I might have gotten excited.
Yeah, I would get excited.
Oh. Wow, I can't believe there's such a difference between sending the audio signal over an XLR compared to the DMX signal going over a similar quality wire.
Well, again, they're engineered for completely different things, and they're completely different signals.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what would happen if we sent an audio signal 1,000 meters. I've never tried it. It would be fun to put it on a scope and see what comes out the other end.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I would expect to see more of the same with the effects of capacitance and inductance and those sorts of things. I would expect to see some degradation in the signal. I would expect to see it attenuated, meaning less of it. But I think I don't even know. I don't even know what would happen if you put into Google maximum length of a microphone signal. I have no idea what would pop up. You'd probably get 100 different answers. And part of the reason, and one of the reasons DMX can be a little bit more specific, is DMX is operating on a standard, ANSI 1.11 now for DMX 512, 2008. And with the microphone, there's a lot of variation in what we're connecting to what and how we're connecting it.
Sure.
DMX standard is a little more defined about what the cable is supposed to be. It doesn't mean people don't make cables that are out of standard. Of course they do. It doesn't mean that equipment that you're going to connect isn't up to snuff, and that certainly is the case. I mean, I know people who can't run 1,000 meters of DMX. They've got equipment that's really degrading the signal. They got poor quality cable, whatever. But at least we have a standard we can kind of say, well, there's a number we can go with. And with microphones, again, there's going to be some relativity depending on what you're connecting to what and how you're connecting it.
Yeah.
But for ease of math, there's your good numbers. 1,000 meters for DMX, 100 meters for, 300 meters for audio cable. And the speakers, it really depends on the gauge of your cable. It does on mic cable too, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
But gauge your speaker cable and the impedance of the load you're driving.
Sure. Interesting. No, that's good. And I don't know if now as you're talking length and cables and all these different things, I've got one more question and we'll wrap it up for tonight. And this is not talking about that side of the amplifier. The cord coming from the wall when you're bringing that the power into. When does a 50-foot run with a heavier gauge, is that when do you start to really see a fall off on your power coming in? Come on now, this should be easy.
It depends. Remember, volt drop, and that's what's really important here is resistance times amperage times length. And remember you have two conductors, there and a back basically. Yeah. So we have to think about the length times two. But it really depends on the gauge of your cord and how much power you're drawing. I have a chart for that too, and we could make a show out of that, talk about power and volt drop and acceptable losses. At some point it's no longer safe. When we not only is it not good for our system, but at some point you're straying into dangerous territory. There's a reason that the NFPA, the fire prevention people, are the ones who administer the electrical code. I think a vast majority of fires in the United States are caused by electricity still. Mm-hmm. We have to bear that in mind. We did a cool thing for my Geek Boot Camp DVD. We took a couple extension cords, one 16 gauge and one 12 gauge. We put an identical load on them and we heated them up. And just simply by powering this load, we heated the cables up. And we looked at it under an infrared camera so you could see the variations of heat. We had our local fire department help us out with that, and even some of the firefighters were stunned to see how much hotter the 16 gauge cable was getting and how much heat was being generated inside this cable.
Yeah.
So I don't have the magic number for you, John, because it's going to depend on how much power you're trying to pull and what size cable you're trying to pull it through.
Sure. Maybe the when I've looked at extension cords, a 50-foot extension cord, let's say just at one of the big box stores, it has an amperage on it generally. Whether it's
Yep.
is that a safe? Should a person take that as a safe number, or is that more of a generous number? How would you feel about that number?
I would feel that any cord that's in good repair that has a UL stamp on it or one of the other approvals, and it has a manufacturer's rating, you should pay attention to that rating. That's how I would feel about
Okay.
it. There is absolutely nothing that I can or would say to overrule a manufacturer's published rating.
Mm-hmm.
That's the gospel according to UL, as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, so it's something that's regulated, and it's safe to feel confident that information is accurate and good to go.
Well, I would say, yeah. I'm going to cover my own rear end here and say, consider the source. If you get this thing, and the whole deal around it seems shady, maybe that's shady too. But, look, if you buy it, you go to the store and you buy a rated cable and it has a published, rating on it. That's what you should consider. Like I said, that's the number you should go with.
Yeah.
You certainly shouldn't exceed that number, especially if it says not to.
Yeah.
If you feel like you're going to be pushing it for that rating, maybe you should get the next size up.
Sure.
Another thing, if the cable feels warm, that's probably a bad sign. And sometimes you're running them right near at or near capacity, they'll feel a little warm to the touch, and maybe we could say that's okay. But I think for me, and what I'm going to go on record as saying is safety has to be number one, and bigger is better here.
Yeah.
So have a good cord and good repair that has a rated approval, and follow the doggone directions. You're not smarter than the people who made that cable.
Yeah. Cool. Well, Ben, that puts us right at 32 minutes, right? Gosh, we've been talking for a long time.
Ha! We killed another episode.
I think, though, we need to, if we can get some things, and we should get that clip from the Geek Boot Camp and where it talks about that. And by the way, for those of you out there, if you haven't seen the DVD, and they can get that on the website, can't they, Ben?
They can get it at a lot of places. It's available in stores throughout the United States and I think 18 other countries. I'm afraid we probably won't be able to use the clip because the DVD is distributed by an international publisher. Okay. It's even though it's my content, it still falls under that juris of all that copyright nonsense.
We could have you animated on the whiteboard.
Well, or for $20 or something like that, you could just have the DVD.
Well, we want them to buy the DVD, and that's what we were going to tease them with and just before the cable, we're getting to the point where it's getting hot, and then we stop.
Oh, I see. Yeah, and then, I'll send a letter to the to the publisher and see what we can do, but just buy the DVD.
Yeah, it is a great DVD.
Then you could have me in your living room anytime you want, and who wouldn't want that, right?
I'm thinking maybe 2 copies. Everyone needs 2.
I think so. We got to have a backup equipment. DJs need backup equipment.
One for the living room, one for the bedroom, because, you never know what you want to learn.
Okay, since we already did a product placement earlier, and now we're talking about the DVD, and I don't have one handy to show you. I didn't know we were going to stray into that.
I didn't either, but actually what was interesting is we actually put that, because I did a review of the Geek Boot Camp.
Oh, yeah, you did. Thank you.
And it actually went back. I saw it went in the feed today again, and it's like, oh, yeah, that's a great DVD. And I remember watching learning, and confusion. Learning.
Well, John, I believe you run a multi-op as well, right?
I did. I don't anymore.
Okay, yeah. Well, maybe you can validate this statement, but again, my face and name is on the DVD, and I make $1.50 every time somebody buys one or something like that. But got to be honest about that. Of course, I have a dog in the fight here, but all that set aside, I think the production value of it is good. The content is very thorough, and it's a great teaching tool for multi-ops.
I would agree. I would agree completely, and I think it's one of those things that you're going to watch more than once because you will pick things up, and as you start to grasp and understand some of the kind of like our Tuesday night talks, there's some things that are going to be a little more basic, and you're going to understand it the first time through, and then after thinking about it and maybe going and checking some things, then you might be able to grasp, more things will make sense to you. And I think that's a
Yeah,
good one.
we didn't intend it to be a sit down all the way through, kind of a cover to cover gripper. We really intended it more to be chapterized as a resource tool. You can go back and watch those chapters. I've been told by some of the other multi-ops too that it is it's a tremendous discipline tool, that when people screw up, they make them watch the DVD. So, got that going for you.
Nice. And then it's tremendous for those times where you're not exactly falling asleep on time.
It'll do it.
It'll put you to sleep.
Puts me to sleep.
If you got some questions for Ben for one of our Tuesday night gear chats, you can see it down below. You can go to Twitter and you can do the hashtag NLFXBen, or you can do the @ symbol NLFXBen. Send him a question, send him a comment, whatever you can think of, or right down below the YouTube in the comments area. Leave us a message, leave us a question. We'll do our best to pick those up in one of the upcoming episodes.
Thanks, John.
Good stuff, good stuff. Well, I thank you, Ben. We had a good time with this tonight, and we will see you again next Tuesday night.
Sounds great.
All right. This is John Young with the Disc Jockey News and Disc Jockey News TV, and Ben Stowe from NLFX Pro. Good night.